So while Kyle and Jason do tech stuff, let's do a show of hands. Who knows what a podcast is? Okay, let's start there then. A podcast is a radio program on the internet that you can play anytime you like. Essentially, it's kind of like DVR, I guess, for TV, but it's a podcast. And because it's really easy to do, people do it about all sorts of things. There's thousands and millions of podcasts about really niche things and really broad things, and it's super easy. As long as you can talk and press record on your phone for a video, you can do this. It's that easy. Okay, so next question. Who has started a podcast? Started
A podcast.
Before today.
Before today? No, because you didn't know what one was. Ava, did you say yes? Okay.
We don't have a podcast series, but we started doing some work so that we make sales training podcasts, so they're 5 minutes to 8 minutes long. Just record a few little snippets about the high-level summaries about certain activities and what actions are to try to enable sales to sell. And then people work from home and they're no longer driving and no longer listening to podcasts.
Yes, that's a big problem. The industry graphs for COVID go kind of like everything like that. Marco, did you say you started or you're thinking?
No, I haven't started, but I'm involved with some at the office.
The microphone's running out.
Also, sales roles. Some people have a different opinion of what the podcast is,
Uh-huh.
and the one my leader is actually more of reviewing somebody else's podcast and discussing it.
Okay.
Well, they do YouTube reaction videos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a fair, review shows. The word I was going to describe a TV review and film review show in England, which none of you have ever seen, so that was hopeless. So you're planning to start one, but
I am.
What about the people on Zoom? Can you ask them?
Yes. So are people here on Zoom planning to start a podcast? Jackie's thinking about it. Depending on how well y'all do today, she may avoid it the rest of her life.
Okay, fair.
I plan to start mine within the next month.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
All right.
That's great.
So what are you gonna do a podcast on?
Business skills,
Nice.
which is what I teach.
YouTube is on podcasts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'll bring in people. I like bringing in guests because it's much better to have someone you can banter with and ask questions, and instead of just being sort of your complete blog, it can be back and forth. It's more interesting conversation.
All right, looks like we're almost done here.
Hear me.
Can people hear me at home? Yes, good. I see nodding. Very good. I think this is like a speaker on, yeah. All right. Yes, please. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Kyle Mitchell. I'm the podcast manager for the District 55 podcast. First ever. Thank you. Has anyone listened to any of our episodes? Raise your hand if you've listened to any of our episodes. Okay, a couple people here at home. Darren, you don't count. I'm sorry, you count in life in general, just not in this poll. Okay, well, our podcasts open up with Ramona Finos as kind of the voice of the podcast, and so I was hoping she would be here today and kind of open the way. So here you go for what she might say. From the District 55 Toastmasters Hybrid Conference 2022 at the Embassy Suites by Hilton San Antonio Brooks Hotel and Spa, welcome to the District 55 Started a Podcast, So Can You educational session. That's right. If I can do it, you definitely can. I was learning from scratch and watching YouTube videos, and that's really about it. Until I found out about this lovely lady right here, Wendii Lord, past division. Yes, you can applaud. You can applaud. She is awesome. She is awesome. Past division director. I served with her last year, and among many, many other things. But she does that for a living, and so I consulted her along with some other people that I knew. My twin brother had run a podcast for a year, and that was the first thing that I went to the experts. Right, got some people to ask some people for some opinions. So that's what I recommend for you if you've never started a podcast and you want to, whether it's big or small. Ours is a little bit more complicated than a lot of podcasts that you listen out there to. You might be familiar with the two ladies in their kitchen talking about stuff podcast. Anybody heard that before? Like My Favorite Murder. That's a great podcast. And it's literally like just two ladies in a kitchen talking, right? And it's awesome. There's a lot of that kind of thing. But ours is more segmented, and so we have different segments and changes every week, and that's what it is so far. But we're going to explore and keep growing and changing as we go. So your podcast can look like anything you want it to look like. I recommend, just like if you were going to be a writer, when you started writing speeches, right? What did you do? You probably went out and started looking at the kinds of speeches you like to hear, right? If you want to be a writer of a novel, then you go out and read what you want to write. And so I recommend you go and listen to what kind of podcast that you want to actually start. But I'll stop talking for a bit because I want to hear from an actual professional who does this for a living, produces a podcast for a living. So Wendii, tell us a little bit about, I contacted you so that I could get a little bit of technical information and stuff. And I want everyone to know kind of about my process with starting this District 55 podcast. And so tell them a little bit about what you do and this process, what you advise me.
Sure. Now I've got to remember what I advised you. Okay, so I write and record a podcast called Career Tools. We have 3 podcasts: Manager Tools, Career Tools, and Executive Tools. They're all about management, careers, and executives, because we name things just like they are. That's one trick for podcasts is, if you want people to find your podcast, name it something that they're looking for. Sometimes we get really clever with our podcast titles, and then people write to us and say, what was that one called? And we're like, yeah, it's called this, but it's about that.
I wanted to call this podcast, it's a lectern, not a podium.
That's true. We had that conversation about, shall we have a clever name or not? So I think what I advised Kyle was, do what you want to do something that you're passionate and interested about. That's the most important thing. The tech stuff is not difficult. As long as you can hit record on your phone, you can record people and yourself. The uploading it to different systems and stuff, that's a little bit more difficult, but if you can upload an attachment, you can probably upload a podcast. And there's plenty of places that will tell you how to do it. There's plenty of services that make it easy nowadays. So that bit's not hard. The hard bit is working out what you want to say, making it interesting and informative or entertaining, or whatever it is that you have in mind that you want it to do, and then doing it and having the confidence to then upload it. Now, I don't get any choice. I record it, my boss uploads it, someone uploads it, whether I like it or not. So that bit was easy for me. I didn't have to have any confidence, and I didn't have any confidence. And the other thing is to get over the hump of no listeners, because nobody is listening to a podcast that you haven't made yet. And nobody's listening to the first one and the second one and the third one. You have to wait for the momentum to build and be okay with 10 people listened. And 3 of them sent me feedback, which is awesome. And the other thing is, you will get feedback. It's a bit like an evaluation. Take what you believe, put your ego aside first, then take what you believe to be true, and then carry on plowing your own furrow, because you don't want to be like someone else. You want to do it the way you want to do it. Was that everything I told you?
That's a lot. I know you also had your sound engineer
Yes.
to listen and give feedback.
Right, exactly. So because ours is a professional one, we have a professional sound engineer who edits the podcast. I always say he makes us sound good because he cuts out all the ums and ahs and all the places where I stumble over words. Paul's the best guy in the world for me, but he gives us feedback on how we sound and how we might sound better. So you have to be incredibly close to a professional microphone, which is something I didn't know, like this close, really close. And it helps to have a pop filter which stops making those sounds, which are quite irritating. It helps that he level sets us so we all sound the same and the volume is the same through every episode, which is something that people notice but can't articulate, that irritates them. So having someone else listen to it on their device once you've recorded it is helpful to make sure that you're getting good sound and that it sounds okay on a tinny kind of phone.
I agree. And it's right in line with the Toastmasters way, right? Is you get feedback, you get evaluation. And I humbled myself when I got the email from him because I was like, okay, 90% of your feedback is way over my pay grade, but thank you so much for the feedback because it was just fantastic feedback. And I learned a lot even from him as a professional sound engineer and ways to kind of make us sound better. So a little bit about our process so that you may learn from this as well and hopefully have an even easier time than I did. We started this podcast during a pandemic. So that was interesting. So we weren't in the same room recording stuff. And so I adopted the best practice of however you can get it to me, I will take it. Okay. And that's worked so far. But as you listen to our podcast, one thing that's not professional grade there is because of that. Similar to if you listen to the radio, right? Just from your local radio station, when you hear people dial in and they're interviewing this analyst or this guest, everyone's audio sounds different, right? Somebody's on their cell phone in their car, somebody's at home on a bad internet connection. It's different every time. So, but that's what we had to do. So the show must goes on, as we know as Toastmasters, and that's what I adopted instead of trying this kind of perfectionist mindset. I thought I'm going to just take it however you can get it because this is our first year. And as you listen to podcasts that have gone 2 seasons, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, then you'll hear the evolution and growth of it. And that's natural. That's just like us when we're speaking, right? We get better and better every year. So don't beat yourself up about that. Don't feel bad about the first meeting. And as Wendii said too, like nobody's listening until you post it. So you technically don't even, there are some people that do a podcast and record a whole season and don't ever release that season. They release the second season, like it's a year zero. And then Darren Bush with us here in Zoom world, he's done that as well. Like you kind of consider things like this is, or YouTubers will do that. Like this is season 0. No one's going to ever see season 0. This is our practice season. And then we get to season 1. But so that's what I did. And some people have recorded their audio on their cell phone. A lot of people in Toastmasters are used to Zoom. So I said, hey, look, if you can just Zoom with me, I can convert the audio. And I'll go in here in a little bit to show you a little bit of how I do that and the conversion. That you got to get creative. And again, it's just searching, doing a web search. If you don't know how to do something, it's somebody else has done it before. I guarantee you somebody has done it before. You just got to find that video, find that article and on the internet and learn from the people that have blazed the trail before. One of the things that I wanted to do from the beginning with this podcast is have a variety of content. And one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of have a regular column going on, just like you see in newsletters and the Toastmaster magazine, right? When you see that, is it John Cadley, I think it is, that has the comedy humor article, like his column at the end of every Toastmaster magazine. And I kind of wanted to do that. So I asked my good friend Darren M. Bush, who's with us today, to do that. And he asked however he could help, he would be happy to. And we've worked together on other conventions and other YouTube videos and so forth. So Darren, would you tell the audience about your experience of recording and basically making the Wordsmith column of yours into a segment for our D55 podcast?
Hello, Kyle. Good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you I really appreciate, Kyle, that you're having me on here. Just for those of you who are wondering, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So Kyle and I have known each other for a long time. There's some good stories there. The process for the Wordsmith is actually pretty simple. I'm a published science fiction and fantasy author. I've also done some nonfiction writing. And there was a point in my Toastmasters career where we wanted to put together a newsletter for the club. And I just wanted to have a regular feature where I talked about my love of language as it applies to Toastmasters. So I wrote about a dozen different articles. They're all, this is another thing that Kyle was mentioning earlier about Google it. I was like, well, how long is an article supposed to be? And I Googled it and I found out there's like an industry standard. So every one of these articles is right at 500 words, which is a nice, easy format for all the different layouts that everybody cares about. And so what I would do is, because it's only 500 words, this is kind of like a table topic speech, is I would ask myself a question, and then I had a certain amount of space on the page to answer the question. And these questions all relate to Toastmasters and what they care about with the use of language in speeches, but also some really fun stuff about language that might get you excited about it. Because one of the things that most Toastmasters deal with is that when they were in school, their experience of like English grammar and having to do spelling quizzes and things like that was really not a lot of fun. So I'm trying to bring the fun back into it. So what I'll do is I have these articles, they were originally intended for print. When Kyle and I started talking, I was like, yeah, I've got this article series already in print. All I need to do is just audio record it. I'll send you the file, you have it. And that's basically what we've been doing. The really interesting thing has been making sure that I practice reading it aloud to myself, to the empty room, basically, and making sure that what's written sounds like what I want it to sound like. So I've had to tweak a couple of things. The really interesting challenge has not been so much the writing, because these are things I've worked on several times over the years. The really interesting challenge was what tone of voice to use and what sort of attitude to put into it. I am the sort of person where, if you know Kyle, you kind of know me by association. I'm perfectly willing to crack jokes and do accents and stuff like that. But I really wanted to approach this much more seriously. I wanted to kind of see how it sounded to just read it seriously. And then I found that I went too far the other way, got too serious. And so for the second, third, fourth recordings, I kind of relaxed a little bit and allowed my personality to come through. And what I find is that no matter how well it's written or how poorly it's written, that if you don't insert yourself into it, then really you're just a computer reading some text off a page, as opposed to, hi, I'm Darren and I have this thing I want to say. It's brief. I think I'm funny. Maybe you don't think I'm funny, but here I am with my words. And that's part of the fun of a podcast, is that you have to not just get your words involved as if it's a speech, but, and of course I'm preaching to the choir here, you got to get your energy and your voice involved and use all of your pathway skills to make people want to listen to the second sentence, to make people want to listen all the way to the end. One of the reasons why those articles are nice and short is because I really wanted to get in, get your attention, answer one question, and then get out, and hopefully have you come back for another one. Kyle, did that answer the question, or do you have more on that?
Yeah, no, that's great. And thank you, Darren, for mentioning pathways. Also, one of the things that's going to be getting people into podcasting, I think, through Toastmasters is the Pathways project that you have as an elective. You can choose for your level 4. And I participated as a guest for one of those such projects with with Erica Lockwood. You may know her, and around District 55 here. And so she did a phone interview with this app, and you can look up, there's several different apps you can use on the phone that are for podcasting. So you essentially, you log in and then you give the link to somebody else, and then they log in through, and it does it all through your smartphone. And then it saves the file, and you can play with it and edit it and convert it and stuff. And so as a guest, when she asked me to be a guest for her podcast for that project, that was only maybe the second or third time I'd ever been like an official podcast guest. So that gave me encouragement to then, when it came around to June last year before the new Toastmasters year, and saying, hey, what do I want to do in the district next year? And really the only kind of thing that I really wanted to do was say, hey, we've never had a podcast. This would be pretty cool. How cool would this, let's go. And of course, the best reason we should do anything in Toastmasters, right, is for our personal development, our personal growth. And that's why we pay our dues, right? We don't pay our dues for other people to benefit. We pay our dues for us to benefit for ourselves. And so when I was looking for something to do, I said, okay, I want to do this so that I can have the opportunity to go and learn research, which I did, learn how to do it, and then get myself in front of other people and build a team so that I can learn from all these people, including like Wendy and this technical, her sound engineer, everybody. I kept learning and learning. And so the Pathways Project, if there's anybody watching this, maybe after the conference, and you're thinking about it, and you've got time, and maybe consider doing that project for Pathways, because it could be you never know, it could be the beginning of a whole new career. One thing that Ramona, so if you listen to our I was in a club with Ramona Finos, and I would hear her speak, and I loved her voice, and I kept wanting to tell her, like, hey, you really should do voiceover. Have you ever thought about doing radio or doing voiceover? And so I finally, when I was getting ready to start this podcast, I asked her, and she was like, oh, wow, no one's ever told me that before. Like, it was, you never know that nobody has ever been told that they have a great voice. You know, I have a face for radio. So, you know, but she has a face for TV and a voice for radio. But one thing that I'll share with you her experience, which I was so flattered to hear, because when she recorded, I gave her a script. I would try to be as formal and official as possible. And I gave, so if you're ever doing that, I completely agree with Darren. You know, he rehearsed first and he read it multiple times. That's the cool thing about podcasts, as Wendy and I were talking yesterday, is it's like giving a speech in Toastmasters, but nobody has to see you. You know, they don't see your weird facial expressions when you go, oh, no, that's not terrible. You know, and you can do it again, and you can do it again, and then you can edit it, which I'll show you here in a little bit in Audacity. But Ramona, I gave a couple scripts for the intro and the outro, the beginning of the podcast at the end. And eventually I'll give her some other bumper scripts as well, which are the kind of pieces that will go in between segments. And so she recorded, she did like 4 takes, and I loved that she actually sent me the raw takes. She sent me the one she didn't like as well, which was really, really cool. And you can hear her kind of like messing up on the takes, because that's what we do, right? And afterwards, everyone that listened to it, including my twin brother who had a podcast for a year, said, wow, she's great. She was great. It sounded amazing. And also, she should think about doing some voiceover as a career, or at least a side job or something, side gig. And so when I heard her feedback, that she said to me, she said, wow, this experience made me think about possibly doing it professionally, or at least exploring it. That's a great compliment, because that's what Toastmasters does. It's about making opportunities for people. So as always, again, I'm preaching to the choir, like Darren said, say yes, to opportunities. Somebody who says, hey, I think you'd be an interesting person to tell a story, on the podcast. And even here at the conference, live in person here, I've been recording some bits, including Marco here in our audience, about the many hats of a Toastmaster. And so listen to an upcoming episode of the podcast from some recordings here at the conference, and you'll get to hear from some of us here talk about the conference experience and about the many hats of a Toastmaster they've been wearing. So say yes, and even to being a guest and stuff, and then you never know what it's going to parlay into, you being a host or a manager or an engineer or whatever. Yeah.
I just want to add before we go on, probably 80% of podcasts you listen to have guests. There's a host and a guest, and it's like an interview, but you don't have to do that. I don't have guests on my podcast because I like to control what's going on. But you don't have to do it that way. There are story podcasts. There are ones that are done like plays. There are one person talking, three people talking. You can do it any way you like. And just because 80% of them is one person and a guest doesn't mean you have to do it that way.
Yeah. Very good point.
Kyle, can I chime in real quick?
Please.
Yeah, if you're talking about creativity with podcasts, there's some really amazing potentials, especially because you're limited to audio. There's a group in Atlanta called the Atlanta Radio Theater Company, which I recommend highly just in general. And they have this wonderful podcast that they put out about 4 or 5 years ago, where it is a fake podcast that's being broadcast from a radio station that is trapped in the zombie apocalypse. So every day they broadcast live from the radio station, right? Somebody's on the bicycle pedaling, so they have electricity, and they're just kind of updating the area around them, trying to help people survive the zombie apocalypse. It's very entertaining. It's a lot of fun, and they do some really amazing stuff with audio. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, it's literally infinite. I mean, infinite possibilities of what your podcast could look like. And like it was said, be yourself, and you never know. You don't have to copy. I'll say this before we go on. The early episodes of the D55 podcast, I got some compliments, maybe sideways compliments, and they're like, "It sounds like NPR," and I was like, "Yes, that's what I was going for." I thought professional, and I love NPR. I was yes, and then he said, "No, I mean it sounded like NPR." Like it should be more fun and lively and funny. And so I was like, okay, cool. But I didn't even realize how much I was inserting my ear was for, and my subconscious vision, I guess, was for NPR style kind of thing. And so, but be open-minded to change it up and open to feedback, just like we do in Toastmasters, so that you can make the best podcast. And I'm hoping that anyone that's watching this or anyone here in the room too, if you're interested in helping out with the D55 podcast, you can email us at podcast@tmd55.org. After 9 months of doing this or whatever, we finally got our first email about a volunteer like last week. So I'm going to be training somebody on doing the editing in Audacity at a Toastmaster. Said I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea, but you needed somebody, and I'm a good Toastmaster, and I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to do this, and I'm interested in learning Audacity. So I'll share a little bit here. Let me see if I can share my screen with Audacity. Well, where is Audacity?
Ava.
Yeah, Ava. We're getting the microphone over to her.
Hear me on the thing. Okay, so hopefully we can hear me on the thing. So when you were setting up your podcast initially, you talked about how you didn't want to perhaps sound like NPR after a few tries. How did you decide on how long, what the duration was of your podcast? Because I've seen podcasts anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour or more. So how did you set upon yours, and do you have that standard set?
Yeah, very good question. So how do you decide how long you want your podcast to be, right? There are some we have a Toastmaster here in District 55, Anna Jaworski, who has some podcasts, and I believe her personal podcast is like 5 to 7 minute segments, I believe. And so I knew that I wanted to have segments. So if I was going to have segments, then it was going to be between 45 minutes and an hour. But I got the same advice from Wendy and from my brother, and reading articles online as well, that if you have it too long, then people aren't going to stay tuned in. They're going to fall off, even if you mix up the variety of the content and so forth. So I wanted to aim at 45 to 50 minutes each episode, and that's basically where we've been, though some of ours have, because of the type of meeting they are. For instance, if they are a scheduled Toastmasters event that is scheduled for an hour, and basically I'm just taking the Zoom audio, converting it, and then putting it in Audacity and editing it, then it might be longer. So it might kind of push close to that hour mark. But ideally, I knew from the beginning, we're going to have an opening, closing, we're going to have bumpers in between where I'm introducing each segment. And then I told Darren, if possible, keep them about 3 minutes, keep his wordsmith articles about 3 minutes. And they worked out perfectly, just really as written. And but I mean, he could cut it down if he needed to, or probably fill it up and stretch if he needed to. So that's kind of what I went into, and I haven't gotten any feedback. So y'all tell me when you listen to the episodes, please send us feedback. If it's too long, if you want something else, if you like something better, interact with us so that we can give you more content that you want. And ideally, what the vision I had with when I was pitching to Kathy and to Violetta was that I thought that we should have have content that would be good enough for the non-Toastmaster audience to suck them in and say, hey, come and check out what Toastmasters doing. Here's some interesting informative information, educational, entertaining. We have everything in Toastmasters, right? We've got humor and stories and learning and sharing of ideas. So I wanted that, and it would mean that it would be, it really couldn't just be like a 20-minute podcast, unless we do, but I kept it open to having bonus episodes. So that might be something you do. One thing that a lot of bloggers will do, and podcasters as well, and YouTubers and so forth, they'll pre-record content for months and months ahead of time so that they can then schedule them to drop, and they don't have to work all the time. They can just concentrate a lot of work at one time and then schedule that to drop, to publish at certain times. And I want to get there. Haven't gotten there yet, but that's something to think about as well, that you can have regular episodes, and then you could have bonus content. And then eventually, if you're doing a podcast where you're trying to monetize, we're a nonprofit, but if you're doing one for profit and you eventually want to monetize, that's one way. You can have subscriptions, people actually paying a monthly fee or a yearly fee to be a member and get bonus content, bonus episodes, etc. So based on what you're trying to do and what your fans and your listeners want, then that will inform, I think, a lot of what the length is, because depending upon what kind of content you're producing, you may want that, oh, I'm on the treadmill at the gym listening to you kind of sized content, versus I'm in my car during rush hour traffic, and it's an hour-long road trip home kind of content, But very good question. Yeah. So here is Audacity. Audacity is a great free resource for editing audio. And I like I said before, what I wanted to do is a little bit more complicated than what you have to do. But I wanted to have some intro music. So I went and looked, just Googled for like copyright free music, and listened to a dozen or so, pieces and stuff, and said, okay, well, what am I gonna, find? And I don't think my laptop's hooked up here to audio anymore, but so I don't know if it'll even play. Can y'all hear anything at home? Probably not. But so I've got these tracks here of the music and the voiceover. Skip to the top.
They start from the middle, the wider they are, the louder the narrower the coaster. Sorry. So the wider they are, the taller and lower they are, that's a louder sound. And when they're close to the line in the middle, they're lower sounds. And everything has a sound, even silence. So it never gets to just being on the line. You always have a little thing. And some people speak loudly and softly. Some people have a very big range between the biggest bars and the lowest ones. Some people have quite a tight range. It's just a different way of talking. The nice thing I always think about being able to see the sound waves is you can see where somebody started and stopped. So if you remember what the segments were or what the question was, and then there was a pause, it's easier to edit. And one thing our sound engineer always asks us to do is, please give me 2 or 3 seconds of silence before you say anything and after you say something, for intros and things. If it's in the middle of a conversation, it's not so critical. But when I do welcome to Career Tools and then I start speaking immediately, it makes it really hard for him to split it. So random advice.
Yeah, and actually professionals will get into the point where they do, is it called room tone? Room tone, where you record just the sound of the room with, maybe your refrigerator humming in the background, the air conditioning running, whatever the environment. Because if you're not in a soundproof room, you've padded your closet, which I've recorded in my closet at home before, and a lot of professional voice actors, they'll record in their car and on the road, and they'll just put blankets around the windows and pillows and whatever you have to do. But if you don't have that, you can now, with the technology, you can record that room tone, and then you can choose the right effect or whatnot to then say, oh, take this and then take that out of the main recording. So I don't think this is going to play, but.
From Central and South Texas, USA, to wherever you are listening from around the world, welcome to the official District 55 Toastmasters podcast.
I know, isn't she good? A great voice.
A little more. There. Now the world can hear. That's what I want.
So you can see I essentially just have these tracks going, and they're staggered based on where I want them.
Putting them together. Sorry, each track is a different recording, and he's putting them together by ordering them. So the track at the top is as long as the others, but it only has sound for the first 5 seconds. And then because of the way the software works, if it can't hear anything from track 1, it moves down to track 2 and so on and so forth. Sorry, Tina.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we have 4 minutes. We would start right. I'll just show you real quick. So we had that, you heard that audio of the intro. Well, now this track here at the bottom is actually my music that I picked, that copyright-free music. So I'm going to unmute it because that track was previously muted. Now I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to start it again, and let's see what it sounds like.
From Central and South Texas, USA, to wherever you are listening from around the world, welcome to the official District 55 Toastmasters podcast.
So I want to have some time for some Q&A just real quick. So thank you all for coming and watching at home as well for this. And thanks for your patience with the technical difficulties. But hey, this is our first hybrid conference and we're making it happen. So I will now open it up for some questions. If you have any questions for our panelists or for me. And Bart, if you can help me with the chat there as well. Jackie says, how do you publish How do you get it out? Okay, very good question. So Libsyn is one of the major, what do you call it, just distribution platforms. And we actually have budgeted this year for the Toastmasters district to pay for Libsyn, Libsyn, to then put that out there. And so if you see when you're listening to stuff online and it's like RSS feed and stuff like that, so wherever podcasts are available, that kind of thing, so you can get on Podbean or iTunes or wherever, then you can just look up those. Libsyn is one of the major ones, but there are other.
We use Libsyn for our back catalog. We have our own media servers and complicated stuff, but for our back catalog, we use Libsyn, and we have since we started podcasting 15 years ago. So I highly recommend it.
And then a lot of people just have their own website, and so for us on tmd55.org, if you haven't ever listened to it, you can just go onto the home page. On the right, there's a button that just says podcast. Click it. You can see all of our episodes. And then periodically we're posting on social media. But as we were getting started here, we have, it's been, a pandemic year. So haven't had as many podcasts out there as much as possible, but keep looking out for more. And that's one way you can do it on your own website, or just actually, I believe the majority of podcasts are on YouTube. And so that doesn't mean that you have to do video, but a lot of them do video, and then people will essentially watch it, but you could also just listen to it.
There are some that are just sound, and there's a picture, or there's just the logo for an hour or however long they talk. YouTube again is, if you can upload something, you can attach an attachment to an email, you can upload to YouTube.
Any other? Go ahead. Go ahead, Darren.
I just wanted to quickly say that I listen to all of my podcasts on YouTube.
Any questions here in the room before we have to close? Or any more from Zoom land? Yes, Ava.
So I actually just had a comment about that one. That's really fun that we did. Again, the ones I do are for corporate for sales, but when we were recording them, we recorded the person speaking as if they were speaking to us. And so we recorded that as a video that you could watch like a YouTube. And then I took that soundbite from the video, mixed it, made it for a podcast version, and then uploaded that separately. So then we had two formats, because if you're going to record it anyway, you might as well look good doing it. And then, especially if you're using Zoom, which is what we use a lot. And then you can have two ways so that people can consume who prefer to see a face, or the people on the go. So just a good thing to think about. If you're doing something like YouTube, you can actually take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ava. Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, and that's that puts into one last time reiterating the magic of podcasting is that you're mixing it. So afterward, you can make the magic happen, behind the curtain, whatever you want it to look like. You can do that. So you can record comments in the middle of segments. You can make corrections in the middle of course, you can go in there and cut out, edit out the ahs and ums and stuff like at the wavelength level and everything. But you can do all of that. So whatever you want it to look like, you can. I can't. Yeah. So Ava asked if I have a script template, and I can send you out the one. Anyone that's interested, yeah, I can send out the one that I send out. It's super basic. It's literally basic. And again, that's something you can just do a web search and find, what professionals use if it helps you. And there's some great content creators on TikTok, for instance, TikTok and YouTube, that let you in on their process of doing voiceover and on recording on podcasting and stuff that you can watch them. But I think we're just about out of time. So I will wrap up and say thank you again to everybody for coming to this session and contributing. And again, if you are interested in helping out with or want to give us feedback for the D55 podcast, you can email us at podcast@tmd55.org. All right. Yeah. Did we have another question? close that. And yeah, Nicole said I listened to all the podcasts and I heard radio. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if when you go through Libsyn, if iHeartRadio is one of the platforms. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, Nicole. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you to Jason Wold for his help with all of the hybrid technology and making this happen. Fantastic.